I'm Lawrence Carter, the Dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel at Morehouse College. And our assembly today is named in honor of Dr. Howard Washington Thurman. It is called the Howard Thurman Crown Forum. 100 years ago, Howard Thurman was a sophomore at Morehouse College and would become valedictorian of his graduating class in 1923, just as he was for his high school graduating class in Florida in 1919. In 1953, Life magazine named him one of the 12 greatest preachers in the United States. And they honored him in such a fashion for being one of the 12 great preachers bringing America back to the churches. Thurman was different. You may not know that he loved Latin, Shakespeare, and the librettos of all operas. He was a mystic, scholar, poet, and a prophet who championed the disinherited by standing for justice in an unjust society, while being the most published Morehouse alumnus. Dr. Thurman taught that the key to the meaning of life is within you, and that responsibility for living with meaning and dignity can never be finally taken away from the individual. That is something to remember in our dealing with pandemics like the American caste system that had a great effect on our presidential election. The health disparities of African Americans based on inequalities between races, global warming or climate disaster, saving democracy and freedom, economic justice, the need to reform the law enforcement system in America, plus the challenges of being cosmic citizens and moral cosmopolitans. Today is a time to be reminded by Howard Thurman that we are responsible, and no one can take that responsibility from any human. In keeping with the idea of being responsible for our futures, I am pleased to announce the 35th Mlk Junior Scholar for 2021 is Mr. Gabriel Denard Cloud from Valdosta, Georgia. The $10,000 to $15,000 annual Mlk Junior Scholarship was established at the Morehouse Chapel in 1990 for pre-seminarians. It was established by the Columbus, Ohio Mlk Junior Birthday Breakfast Committee, which prepares for the largest sit-down meal in honor of Dr. King in the United States. Gabriel is a graduating senior business administration major. He will be applying to Harvard Divinity School and Emory's University's Candler School of Theology to prepare for a career integrating business and faith concerns. Gabriel is the 84th Vice President of the Morehouse Student Government Association and the 36th President of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel Assistance Program. Gabriel, you have my sincere congratulations and best wishes.
Good morning, my Morehouse family. My name is Gabriel Denard Cloud, a senior business administration major from Valdosta, Georgia, and I humbly serve as the 36th president of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel Assistance Program, as well as SGA vice president. And I have the esteemed honor of introducing our speaker for the Howard Thurman Crown Forum. Dr. Dante Arkwick was born and reared in Washington, D.C., and relocated to Atlanta, Georgia while attending Morehouse College. He received at Morehouse College a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science with a concentration in pre-law. While at Morehouse College, he was one of the first recipients of the William H. Cosby Grant for Landmark College's Gifted Dyslexic Student Program. Pastor Quick accepted the call to ministry under the pastorate of Morehouse professor, Reverend Dr. Aaron L. Parker of the Zion Hill Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. In response to his commitment to serve God and God's people, Pastor Quick received a Master of Divinity with a concentration in theology from Princeton Theological Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey. Pastor Quick also served on numerous faculty committees and graduate chaplain for the African American students at Princeton University. Pastor Quick published his first article entitled The Relevance of Race in Princeton Theological Review and is a contributor to the African American Lectionary. Pastor Quick has served both in church and the academy in several capacities. Secularly, Pastor Quick has served in the offices of mayor and congressmen and governors. He also served as the legislative representative for the Atlanta Board of Education. On September 8, 2017, Reverend Quick was conferred with his PhD in philosophical and systematic theology with a focus on African American studies from the Graduate Theological Union University of California at Berkeley. Reverend Dr. Quick is the proud parent of Alexander Dante and Kennedy Danielle. Following a selection from the world-renowned Morehouse College Glee Club, you will hear from our Howard Thurman Crown Forum speaker, Reverend Dr. Dante Arkwick.
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. My Lord battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. My Lord, you may talk about Gideon, you may talk about your never fail. There's none like good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Jericho, up to the walls, Jericho, Jericho, march with spirit and spirit, and go blow them ram horns. Joshua cried, 'cause the battle lamb in my hand. My Lord, then the lamb sheep, horns blow, trumpets began to sound. Joshua commanded the children to shout, and the walls come tumbling down. My Lord, that morning Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. Yes, Jericho, yes, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. My Lord, down. My Lord, down. My Lord, down. My Lord. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down.
Good morning. My name is the Reverend Dr. Dante Arkwick. I'm privileged to be a graduate of Morehouse College. To Dr. David A. Thomas, the 12th president of our esteemed institution. To the Reverend Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter Sr., founding dean of this great chapel. To the men of Morehouse and to Morehouse men, and all of you who are affiliated with this remarkable institution. I've been tasked to speak to the origins of our discontent. I'm quickly drawn to Isabel Wilkerson. In her book, Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent, she lays a framework by which we can move thematically. She helps us to understand and to put this issue in a frame of reference. She says, and I quote, "What scientists have only recently discovered is that the more familiar earthquakes, those that are easily measured while in progress and instantaneous in their destruction, are often preceded by longer, slower moving, catastrophic disruptions, rumbling 20 miles or more beneath us." She says, "They are too deep to be felt and too quiet to be measured. For most of human history, we've never known them. They are a portent as those we can see and feel, but they have long gone undetected because they work in silence, unrecognized until a major quake announces itself on the surface. Only recently have geophysicists had technology sensitive enough to detect the unseen stirrings deeper in the core of the earth. They're called silent earthquakes. And only recently have circumstances forced us in this current era of human rupture to search for the unseen stirrings of the human heart, to discover the origins of our discontents. I am struck by her notion of silence. Deep and resonating is that notion of silence. A silence that is loud and longing to possess the internal integrity of all whom encounter it. A silence that Charles Long puts into perspective. Long posits that the difficulty with truly understanding the power of silence is that one cannot use words to get to the roots of the structure itself. Therefore, Long contends that silence and words are codependent. They are in a codependent relationship with each other. He says, and I quote, Without words, there can be no silence. Yet, the sheer absence of words is not silence. Silence is present without words. Silence is all-encompassing. Silence is that which abides us in understanding that prior to our words, there is a pre-existing reality. Before we label and attach value, there was existence. It is here that Long turns to Wittgenstein and his text, Tatius, in which he understands Wittgenstein to be suggesting that a thing that shows itself prior to the speech act and hence stands in the foundation for which we speak cannot be truly put into words. This points to what he would call ontological integrity, an integrity that cannot be reduced by language. Hence, there's a kind of mystical aspect to them. As such, all existence has its basis in silence. With this foundation in place, the silent voices of modernity, those voices that have been hidden and subjected to the absence of presence by monarchy, by society, by white supremacy. This mode of thought allows us to draw ontological existence to the surface. An ontological existence, a people, a presence, a way of living that has been ignored and subjugated. This also allows us an important cultural and theological construct of discovery: the silence of being. The mode of being that does not allow itself to be made known and demonstrated in language. It stands for objects, but through which a kind of showing in silence, a kind of being that makes the speech act not so much necessary, but an addition to. There is a radical difference between the non-existence of an object and this mode of existence. Silence, therefore, offers an ontology of existence that's new, a newness. It allows for us to attach symbols and myths to something that a culture had heretofore tried to hide, what Long calls opaqueness. It is a silence which may no longer terrify us. It is a silence which in the showing might give us understanding of a human mode of being that moves us beyond conquest and radical capitalism and racial capitalism and exploitation. The origins of our discontent. It is here, my brothers, that I would offer you the philosopher Hans Georg Gadamer. In his reading of hermeneutics, Gadamer points us to something called the question. In it, Gadamer says the question is that thing that opens up new and radical insights and understanding into what we have not yet explored or known. The question allows the things that are being questioned to be revealed, to become alive to us, to expose us, and to give us new insight. We as people of color have been questioning in the Western context for quite a long time. Oh, in 1851, a woman by the name of Sojourner Truth, speaking to a women's rights convention in Old Stone Church in Akron, Ohio, asked the great question, ain't I a woman? Do I not have integrity? Does my blackness matter? Yes, on July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass gave a speech on the occasion of commemorating the Declaration of Independence. There he stood in front of a largely white, educated audience in Rochester's Corinthian Hall. He asked the question, what to the American slave is the 4th of July? What does your independence have of me? Are you asking questions today? Are you asking questions about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the Proud Boys and the radical white supremacy that has existed in the White House? Are you asking questions about the origins of our discontent? I have been challenged to distill within the allotted time to me, to dig into the deep and abiding wellspring of our discontent. Are those origins to be found at the Cape Coast Castle, out of which 11 million black bodies were marched onto ships arriving from the Europe and Americas, holding the names of our great Christian markers? Slave ships named after the apostles Paul and Peter, implicating Western Christianity and white supremacy in one boat for the destruction of black bodies, the origins of our discontent. We have searched for those origins. W.E.B. Du Bois searched for the origins of our discontent. In his 1903, The Souls of Black Folks, he asked, "One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." He was looking for the origins of our discontents, a sort of strange illness that we are burdened with, our blackness and our Americanness. And Frantz Fanon follows him in his classic 1952 text, Black Skin, White Mask. Fanon posits there, ontology, once it's finally admitted as leaving existence by the wayside, does not permit us to understand the being of the black man. For not only must the black man be black, he must be black in relation to the white man. He goes on to argue, overnight, he has been given two frames of reference within which he has had to place himself. His metaphysics, or less pretentiously, his customs, and the sources on which they were based, were wiped out because they were in conflict with a civilization that he did not know and that was imposed upon him. Fanon is talking about the silence that was imposed on us, the ontological erasure that was attempted to be implemented in the black body. How do we reconcile the origins of our discontent? Where do they come from? The Reverend Dr. James Noel, historian of religion, gives me a framework. He says, whatever the Africans' retentions are to be found in black worship, they are not to be given direct routes, but were transmuted and filtered by the middle passages, incommutability. Meaning was erased. Structure and the spoken word was erased. We have made the mistake of painting Africa as one monolithic society. Noel helps us to understand that each African was brought from an independent place with its own dialect, its own tones, its own way of living, its culture embedded next to each other, not the same, thrown into the depth of depth on a slave ship, brought together, unable to communicate in the same language. How do these people in the midst of chaos, in the belly of destruction, how from each tribe, each culture, do they communicate? Noel says there was a deep and abiding moan. A moan that facilitated the expression one captive to another, that broke the silence of death in the midst of feces, in the midst of dead bodies, in the midst of those who gave up the ghost. There was a moan. One tribe to another was transcended. And in that moment, Noel says the captives were turned to the African American, a modern creation, a divine movement, an acknowledgement that the moan was the first language of black folk. The moan. Does that speak to the origins of our discontent? Does that speak to whom we were created? And Noel does not stop there. He says, beyond the known, the black man and the black woman were then elevated in the plantations of the South, in the heat of the burning sun, amidst the cotton and the sugar. There, the moan was transformed into a radical shout, an affirmation that I am still here. The moan got me here. The moan sustained me. The moan gave me a commonality. Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave, was the shout. And the shout suggests that I do have ontological priority, that even though I have been subjected to horror, to death, to mistreatment, to the robbery of my language, my religion, my culture, that in the middle of the moan, I will survive. That in the middle of the moan, I will continue to stand. And in the hush harbors of that field, we gathered and we shouted. I've got a robe, you've got a robe, all God's children got a robe. In those fields, we shouted, go down, Moses, way down to freedom land. There we identified the origins of our discontent, and we said they shall not have the last word. In the bloody summer of 1919, after fighting for this nation, being lynched in the largest numbers in history, we still moaned and shouted. What are the origins of our discontent? Well, I will suggest that long before Noel, long before Sojourner, long before Frederick, long before so many others, the origins of our discontent can be found in the Hebraic writer. In Genesis 3, we find the Creator in all of her glory, God walking through the garden at a time in the evening breeze, looking for Adam and his helpmate. As he walked, they hid themselves from the presence of the Lord, according to the scripture in Genesis 3. But the Lord called out to them, where are you? Where are you? It is amazing that in our discontent, though the Creator knows where we are, the Creator breaks the silence, calling for us, seeking us. Where are you? I heard the sound in the garden and I was afraid, Adam said, because I was naked and I hid myself. And in pre-Gadameron fashion, before the philosopher was born and or created, the Creator said, who told you you were naked? This is the founding question that gets to the heart of the origins of our discontent. Who told you you were naked? And in all that we've gone through, to struggles, radical white supremacy, police brutality, through Sandra Bland and Emmett Till, through the riots of Watts, who told you you were naked? Through the creation of slums and food deserts, substandard education, who told you you were naked? Through federal legislation that created redlining, who told you you were naked? Through voter suppression, who told you you were naked? Young men of Morehouse, who told you that you would not have the same opportunities? Who told you that a black college was substandard to the larger white institutions? Who told you that you were a thug, you would be a nobody? That because you didn't come from the right neighborhoods or you were not a member of the Boule, who told you you were naked? Who told you you were naked, sisters? That you were just your flesh incarnate, that you did not have value? Who told you you were naked? And out of the moan of the nakedness came the shout, and I'm tired of being tired. Well, here I turn from the writer of Genesis to Howard Thurman. In his Lawrence Lectures on Religion and Society of 1978, Thurman says, and I quote an extension, there is a unity that binds all living things into a single whole. This unity is sensed in many ways. When walking alone in woods off the traffic that makes up the daily existence, a stillness settles in the mind. Nothing stirs. The imprisoned self seems to slip outside its boundaries, and the ebb and flow of life is keenly felt. One becomes a part of a single rhythm, a single pulse. Sometimes there's a moment of complete other identity with the pain of a loved one. All the intensity and anguish are deeply felt. One enters through a single door of suffering into the misery of the whole, of all the human race. with no margin left to replace, one calls one's own life. What is felt belongs to no one, but is everywhere, binding and holding tight a circle of agony until all life is gathered into a single, timeless gasp. There are other moments when one becomes aware of a thrust, of a tingling of joy that it rises deep within until it bursts forth, radiating happiness that bathes all light in the glory and in its warmth. Pain, sorrow, grief, all seem as joy becoming. There is nothing new nor old to this period, only the knowledge that what comes as a flooding insight of love binds all living things into a single whole. The felt reverence spreads and deepens. My brothers and my sisters, the origins of our discontent is the divided nature of our inner being. We are called to withdraw and find ourselves in wholeness, to seek the inner altars of our lives, to desire the unyielding and accepting presence of a higher spirit that then sends us into the world with a connectedness, a demand, a desire to speak of those who feel naked. Our beloved institution has challenged us, yet holds a crown over our head and challenges us to grow tall enough to wear it. Who told you? Who told your cities? Who told your families? Who told you you were naked? We are to leave this place and grow in such a way that we walk out, educating in the righteousness of maize, governing in the righteousness of those who have been called to be bigger and stronger than themselves. Who told you were naked is a lie. We are now challenged to grow into the wholeness that our beloved institution has been calling us to. Govern like Maynard Jackson. Run like Edwin Moses. Shout like you're in the Glee Club. Advocate like Martin Luther King. You are not naked. You are clothed in the glory of God. You are not naked. You are made in the Creator's image and likeness. You are not naked. You are wonderfully and fearfully made. And yet, the challenge for you today is to walk in the stillness, the silence that is pre-existing, to honor the ancestors, and to move towards creating unity in a world that benefits by your silence. Do not be silent in the boardroom. Do not be silent in the classroom. Do not be silent in the union halls. You are not naked. You wear the armor of the Creator. You march in the pathway of the ancestors. You are not naked. I challenge you, walk in the unending legacy that breaks the silence and yet embraces it. The origins of our discontent are not strong enough to withstand the inner calling of unity. I give honor to the ancestors, to those who made a way for me, to my mother and my family, to my son and my daughter. As I charge you, so shall I live. God, thank you for this moment, for this chapel, and for the men and women who will receive this message. I thank you for the opportunity to give it and to channel those who came long before me in your name. Amen. Thank you for this opportunity. Have a blessed day.